Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Adobe Extensions QuickTip tutorial. In this one, I'm going to be showing you all I know about optimizing the speed and performance of your extension. These are just going to be a few keynotes that I use all the time myself, go through my code to adjust and make sure these things are done in order to make sure my extension is running at optimal speed. This is going to be a quick tip, so we're going to quickly go through these, and before we get started, I do want to remind you down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly in the channel, and down in the description you can follow us on GitHub for lots of cool coding updates, and also down there in the description follow us on Instagram for other live updates. If you're not already a member of our Discord server, you can come and join and get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, submit tutorial ideas, hang out with our knowledgeable members and trusty mods, and much more. And if you'd like to help support the channel and get cool perks like emojis, Discord status, code a week in advance, VIP streams, you can become a member, supporter, premium supporter, or VIP linked in the description. Alright, so let's just go over these optimizations that I like to use and go over myself. The first one I'm going to talk about is refactoring your math or optimizing your math. In programming, math isn't always the same speed if you use addition versus multiplication versus division or do square roots or powers. Different mathematical operations generally have different speeds. So if you can, use the most optimal speed. Instead of saying 1 divided by 10, division is actually slower than multiplication. So what you can do to be slightly faster is say 1 times 0.1, which is a tenth. This is a tenth, this is a tenth, and we're simply basically modifying the algebra, which makes it faster when processing. This doesn't apply extremely well to extensions necessarily. If you were running thousands or hundreds of thousands of operations, this could save you a lot of time, but it is less common in extensions that you're doing so much. But this is one thing you can do, is make sure your math is as optimal as it can get by using things like multiplication, avoiding powers, and things like that. Next is to resize your content, your images, your videos, and your file-based elements. In this example extension here, I have a plus button. If I made this smaller, it would probably load faster. Additionally, when I hit the pause or stop and play button, it's pretty responsive now, but if I had a lot else going on, it would improve the speed by a decent amount if I changed the size of my elements. If I made this play button smaller, it has to load less pixels in and less data into the project. And overall, especially if you have an extension which loads templates or presets from a giant list of them on your hard drive, this could help save you a lot of time. Instead of having to load 100 1080p images for previews, you might only have to load 100, I don't know, 360p or 480p files. My next tip is to use callback functions instead of timeouts. Now, sometimes in HTML or JavaScript, you use a set timeout to wait a certain period of time before you execute some code. In this case, I wait 2 seconds before I generate my timer menu. So if I launch my extension, it's actually going to take 2 seconds before it loads this timer menu that gets generated. Sometimes this can add a lot of time depending on where and how often you use set timeouts. On occasion, you may have a set timeout set to wait for a script or something else which takes a bit of time, and maybe you have a 10-second timeout where your extension is doing nothing for 10 whole seconds. That isn't fully optimized, and the way to get around that is to use callback functions if you can. What a callback basically does is, instead of having to set this timeout and wait for 10 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever, it's going to force the program to execute some code after it's actually been run. Because JavaScript and JavaScript extended, in the case of CEP extensions, are asynchronous, meaning they run on different clocks, some JavaScript code might be running faster than your JavaScript extended, and if it thinks it's done with the JavaScript extended, it could just go on to the next process and have issues because the JavaScript extended is behind. What a callback function does is it says, run my JavaScript, and basically have some information call back or run a function after that code is complete, and it changes it in such a way that you don't have to set timeouts, and it will execute asynchronous code synchronously. Next, if you can load fewer elements in general, that's going to be good. This may not apply to you all the time because you may have a client who demands a certain level of detail on the screen, or you may have just a high level of elements that need to be placed in your extension. This again applies more for things that contain templates, lots of thumbnails and previews. The less you can load, the better. I have dealt with some projects where I have to load on a single page upwards of 100 or more PNG thumbnails. Although it's just a PNG file and it's less than a megabyte, that's still a lot of information it has to load up and process. So if possible, reduce the number of elements in your interface, and that should greatly improve your speed. And the last thing is to reduce your animations or transitions if you have them. A lot of code has no transition, where it will just switch states, and sometimes you have some code that will have a fade transition. Maybe it has some kind of position change that animates. These are things that can add a lot of processing power. Again, it always depends on how many times it's being done and to how many elements. If you have a fade animation being applied to a dozen things at once, that's going to start building up some processing sluggishness as compared to optimizing it and only having a couple of animations running at once. But that's really it for this tutorial, guys. It's just a couple of simple things I really wanted to go over. I have other tutorials on these more specific things in some cases. Again, to recap, refactor your math. Use the most optimal mathematical operators like multiplication when possible. Resize your images, videos, and file-based elements. Don't load the source image if it's 4K or 5K. Make sure you use the most small and high quality version you can. And especially if you have many images or videos you're loading, load as many of them as you can in a small resolution. Then use callback functions instead of timeouts. Instead of having to guess how long to wait before your JavaScript extended code is done running or other JavaScript functions, use callback functions which force chronological order as you type it. Then load fewer elements in general if possible in your extension. If you've got tons of previews, if you can, optimize and reduce that. Then reduce your animations and transitions. Again, this is dependent on your project, but if your UI has a ton of transitions, position animations, scale animations, whatever, advanced CSS or advanced JavaScript animations, reduce that where you can. And that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit the thumbs up button down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly in the channel. And down in the description, you can follow us on GitHub for coding updates, follow us there, and follow us in the description on Instagram as well for other live updates. If you're not already a member of the Discord server, you can come and join and get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, submit tutorial ideas, hang out with cool members, and much more. And if you'd like to help support the channel, become a member, supporter, premium supporter, or VIP, you can get cool perks like badges, code in advance, member status in the Discord, live streams, and much more. Link for that is in the description. Thanks again for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.